Can you remember where you were on the 22nd of April in 1993? Were you too young to remember these dates? Perhaps you were not even born. Well, let me be a little bit more recent. Let me take you back to 2000. Where were you on the 27th of November in 2000? That was the year 2K. Can you remember? I'll even go more recent in 2005. That was only 20 years ago. Surely most of my viewers were born. But do you remember where you were on the 30th of July in 2005? Very random days, weren't they? Let me just go a little bit more recent. Do you have a recollection of what you were doing on the 27th of September in 2023? Does this ring more of a bell? Or 7th of Jan 2024? Most of us will never remember these days because they don't mean anything to us. We got on with life and life has passed us by. But on those days, families' lives changed forever and things were never the same for them. To give you guys some idea, the first date I gave of the 22nd of April in 1993, 32 years ago almost, a young 18-year-old boy with a lot of prospects left school and went to a friend to play computer games like they do. He looked at his time and realized that he was running late. His friend and himself ran out to get on the bus, and this was in London. They tried to change buses so that they got home early, a decision that would ultimately change their lives. They had no idea anyway. And while waiting for the connecting bus, this young 18-year-old by the name Stephen Lawrence ran to the end of the road to see if there was a bus in sight. At that point, a mob of young teenagers came towards him with certain racial slurs and attacked him viciously. I would not go to the details of the attack because it's terrible to listen to. His friend picked him up after the attack with onlookers looking at about 10:40 p.m. on a main busy street in London, Plumstead. And he ran for a few yards and fell down. And his friend ran to get paramedics and some help. Some off-duty police officer stopped and covered him on the pavement while he bled to death. He was proclaimed dead shortly afterwards. Do you want me to talk about the incident in 2000? I don't even think I can do it because it's too emotional for me to recount, but I'll try. A young 10-year-old boy, few months short of being 11, left school near Peckham in London and was hopping very excitedly out of the library about 3:40. This was on the 27th of November in 2000. And that was the last image that was seen of him. I have an 11-year-old. I have a 12-year-old. And I have other kids across different age groups. So this pains. And most of us watching, we don't have to have kids to have the human feeling that stories like this brings out of us. And this young boy got stabbed with a broken bottle. He fell on a stairwell near an estate, and onlookers called for help, but he'd already bled to death. A 10-year-old, his name was Damiloka Taylor, born in Lagos 10 years before and had only been in the UK for less than a year. He went to a very good school in Lagos, a Montessori school, which are very prestigious schools for special kids. He only came to the UK with his parents to seek medical attention for his sister who was epileptic. He did not choose to come here. His life in Nigeria was beautiful, but they had to come for health reasons. I'll come back to this. And they lost him less than a year in the UK trying to settle down. Those who were convicted of his murder were 12 and 13-year-old brothers. I have 12 and 13-year-olds. They killed a 10-year-old without any provocation on the streets in the UK. I'll give you guys two other examples And I'll talk about why I'm doing this video today. In 2005, Anthony Walker was in Liverpool in Huyton, one of the first black families to settle in this area. It was a summer day. He was at home most of the day babysitting his nephew. And what he did was walk his girlfriend and his cousin to the bus stop for them to leave. As soon as they got to the bus stop, they saw some white boys and they promised to stop them. So they walked to the next stop. And immediately, these same men, or young boys, I'll say then, drove past them with a car and started chasing. So they ran into the nearby park. And unfortunately, Anthony tripped. And that was it. He got stabbed in a very, very horrific way. In fact, they used an axe and his skull was damaged. This was not provoked, but he was involved in another fatality, just yet another one too many. And the third example I'll give is very recent. It happened on the 27th of September in 2023. Most of us watching hopefully saw this. And this girl, beautiful, God-fearing she was called, loved her friends, was faithful to people she loved, had a bright future. Parents had paid a private school for her. She was on her way to school with her friend in the morning, and there was an altercation with her friend and the friend's ex-boyfriend. They had arranged to give each other's belongings back. The relationship had to end. This 15-year-old girl with her school uniform, bright like anything, arrived with her friend, and the said boy did not bring his own side, and it involved a teddy bear that was given when they were in the height of love, like teenagers do. This very random act changed her family's life because she decided to go and defend her friend. So she seized what her friend had given to his ex and ran off, like teenagers would do. And this guy followed her and stabbed her on her neck. She lay on the floor. Paramedics came, helicopters, all sorts of help next to a bus stop, and she was again killed. I am giving you guys all these examples not to scare anybody but to educate. You know, a couple of years ago, I could accept ignorance as bliss. A couple of years ago, I had no idea about the pressures of urban culture, racism, gangs, knives, guns, drugs, when I did not have any kids. I was shielded a little bit from it. But I'll tell you guys why I decided to educate myself and why I'm really going into this level of detail for this video. I have a lot of you guys, viewers. A lot of you guys are based in the UK, maybe in the US, Canada, Europe, Africa, and most of you are immigrants trying to find your feet. I got sent this particular story I'm going to talk about today by about 3 of you. Thanks for those who sent it. And initially when I saw it, I've been in a bit of a space that I could not really think. I'm going through my own personal challenges, and I decided not to look in detail. Somebody else asked me, please, I want your take on this. Can you do a video? And I'm here for you guys. So I decided to do a video. The main story today is that a Ghanaian boy, a 14-year-old British-born Ghanaian boy, filed a lawsuit or took his parents to court citing abandonment in Ghana. This story has different angles to look at it, and you know that I don't look myopic, I look at the big picture. The first thing I'm going to say is, how did we get to the point that our kids take us to court? It's the world we live in. Social media, being woke, being smart, being independent, being mature, knowing what we want, being assertive, all these positive things that we want our kids to be so that they're not bullied and they stand their ground. That could all be okay till it's against their parents, like in this case. This young man was deceived, I'll say that in quotes, that there was a relative in Ghana that was unwell and his parents were going to visit and they asked him to come along. Unbeknown to him, this was a ploy to get him to remain in Ghana for many reasons which I'll come to in a minute. And they got him a boarding school, put him in there and traveled back to the UK. This is one of many cases I personally know. And before I even talk about my take, I want to say to you guys viewing, when we light our cameras, let me talk about myself. Whenever I put my camera up to tell a story, I don't have to cram it. I don't have to do so much research because I experience these things daily and they affect me and people around me. We put ourselves out here to share things that most people are too embarrassed to do. But I've realized that somebody has to, and I'm happy to do it. Shared a few stories about kids, immigrant kids, and the challenges of bringing them up abroad. I have 4 kids. When I hear about the murder in 1993 at 18, my son will be 18 in less than 2 years. My heart bleeds. I hear about the little boy, Damiloka Taylor. I hear about the 14-year-old. I have kids this age. I have family, very close family that I cannot disclose, that have been in the same situation where they've had to take their kids abroad, but it's not been successful because it was done too late. I don't tell these stories because I want to just talk. I do this so that I can help 1, 2, 3, 4 people, because I keep saying that we don't have a framework to use. We are learning as we go along. Maybe in generations to come, we would have things streamlined and we'll find our feet. I don't know how that is going to happen. This young man felt abandoned and trapped or stuck in Ghana and said he was not studying to his full potential. He felt lost. He was getting into fights. He was picked on because he did not understand. He was not eating and everything possible, and made contact with the British High Commission, I believe, and a few charities took his case on and got him a lawyer. The judge ruled in the parents' favor. That's the reason why I can do this video and have the energy, because if it was the other way around, I'll be too broken. That was fantastic news for me. Like a parent who has always advocated that our upbringing in Africa, I don't care where you come from, is 10 times better. I did a last video about my take on bringing our kids here when they're still very fragile and can get into street issues. I had a lot of backlash from people saying, I don't agree with you. And I let it slide. A lot of you even don't have kids. And with all due respect, I'm sure you're going to have them soon. It is not negotiable. The difference why we leave our countries to come here for a better life is not the cost of a life. Some of you even went further to write to me and say there is no electricity for the kids to study in Africa. There is no opportunities for jobs. It's a deadbeat country. The economies are failing us. So we want to travel with our kids. Let me stop you right there. I'd rather have a child study with a lantern, with a lamp, than come to this part of the world and lose their lives on the streets. We are not equipped to deal with what is happening. Somehow, people who came here younger can understand the cues and spot issues with kids. A lot of us who come here older, like the influx of immigrants over the past 5 years, especially for the work schemes, they don't have a clue what happens on the streets abroad. There are several things that sometimes I feel is beyond your control. The first thing is gang culture. Do your research, and I've done mine. Look at the numbers of Black or Afro-Caribbean kids involved in crime, in gangs. Well over 60%, like in London. Do you know why? I'll tell you in a minute what to spot and why they shift towards gangs. Second, drugs. There are drugs everywhere now, don't get me wrong, but I'll tell you why when you're abroad, it's completely different. The other thing are racial attacks. The fourth, circumstances. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. People have a lot more mental issues in this part of the world. Do you blame them? You walk around, you see the color of the buildings, brown, depressing. A lot of kids have mental breakdowns just based on the way the country is made. And the fifth thing that could happen in this part of the world is mixing with wrong friends, basically living in the wrong postcode. And that's why I always say that I'll rather live in the worst house on the best streets than the best house in the worst street. I'd rather have that any day, anytime, because you can do all you can as a parent at home within the four walls of your home. You can teach them about God, you can make them to go to church, you can get them to be spiritual and religious, to love people. But when they step out of the door, who do they walk to school with? Who do they meet in school? Who do they hang out around the parks with? And a lot of you guys keep saying, don't separate families. Let me say something. Why are you abroad in the first place, if I may ask? Most my viewers, or most immigrant families, Africans at large and Caribbeans, come here for a better life. I'll be surprised if anybody just came to the UK because they wanted to travel. You will do that on holidays. You will not bring your family. And what happens when you're looking for a better life? There are two things. You probably had a decent enough life back home for you to afford to travel. So you miss the point. It's okay to travel if you want to give your kids a better opportunity in the future, or if you have a skill that could get you a lot more economic and financial freedom. That is okay. But what we have not factored in are the kids that either we've had already back home, or those that we have while we are pursuing a better life. How do their lives turn out as compared to those of us who were grounded and born in our native countries? There is a very, very good explanation for why we turned out okay. Forget social media, which obviously is a bit of one of the reasons why kids are a lot more informed, recalcitrant, and can be more problematic. But the other thing is that generations, kids are a lot more intelligent, expressive, and bold as the years go by. Let's even just look at kids. I believe that there's a bit of evolution. As you see kids as little as any age, they're punching phones, they know technology, because as we are growing, as the years are going by, they're a lot more enlightened. They have a bigger sense of understanding and appreciation of their environment, and they become ultimately more intelligent. When you have an intelligent child, it's very difficult. It's very, very tricky. You can go this way or you can go that way. You can be harnessed in a positive way or in a negative way. They are the ones who are to be watched. Those in the middle will always stay in the middle. I say this because this story just vindicated what my last video was about, and I have a plethora of stories. Some of the kids have walked out of the schools and found themselves almost back in the UK due to organized crime and gangs, and the parents are at risk of being attacked due to spoiling the gang thing. And the last example I'll give before I state some facts and end this: 7th of January this year, Kelyan, Bokassa, a young 14-year-old, was killed on a bus in London, again, around the Woolwich area. It was so painful to see this guy who his mom said he loved to cook, he loved football, he was aspiring, but he'd struggled and had involvement with crime as little as 6 years old. And that's when I understood the severity of what some parents face based on where they live, especially in London. There have been organized gangs for years. And gangs are not illegal. It's when they take part in activities that are illegal. There's some gangs that are into street rapping. There's some gangs that are into the wrong things, grooming, sexual grooming. Women are involved. You can try as much as possible at home, but when you cannot afford to live in an affluent area, or one parent cannot afford to stay at home and watch the kids, it's almost a disaster about to happen. This woman, the mother of this boy who was killed in January on the bus, she cried for help. He'd been in and out of the care system because he was showing signs. He was on drugs, he was tattooed, he'd lost weight, he was moving with knives. She asked for help and she did not get the help she needed, and she was not surprised. That breaks my heart. For a mother, especially when we see single mothers crying for help when the kids are most vulnerable, and it takes a life or many other lives to be lost, we need to do something now. Otherwise, there's an epidemic. After he was killed, we knew that 2 months before, a boy his age, in similar circumstances with the same sort of gangs, was killed. Who cares about who kills them? Who cares about the verdict months later? Who cares about what the repercussions will be? But this mother and this family's life has changed forever already. I am not saying this to scare anybody. There's just something I want to say. There are a lot of families who bring up kids in this part of the world and they are stellar students. They go to private schools, they go to state schools, they come out to be wonderful, they do well, they are the parents' pride, and then there's the other number. Let's flip it back home. If you can afford to come and relocate for a better life, what my suggestion will be, get yourself in a way that you can travel back and forth so that you don't feel like you've abandoned your kids. Let them grow to be grounded. Let them grow to understand repercussions on actions. I don't like to use the word fear, but sometimes that fear that we grew up knowing that you would have a beating shaped a lot of us to who we are today. Not like we're perfect, but we came out in a lot better shape. We learned how to respect our parents. We knew danger, and we knew there was nothing like fast money. If you can do that and get the kids maybe to come here in the summer holidays, or one parent, I'll say that again, one parent can go back home and watch them if you want to put them in day schools and keep your eyes on them. Do you know the number of kids that have lost their lives to knife and sharp objects on the streets? The numbers are staggering. A lot of these are Black African families. The kids want to go to school. Damilola had no business with Gang at 10. He was just stabbed by siblings who had been known by the system of committing these crimes. Ellianne, the girl who was stabbed by this boy in London because of a teddy bear, had no involvement with gang. She just had a friend. Do you think that our kids back home will have the nerve in front of people, if they're not high on drugs, to stab another girl that age? Where would they get the knives from? We have gangs back home, but if you can afford to come here, you can afford to live in a decent area back home and instill these values. A lot of you came and said, if I separate families, the mother goes back home, the father stays here, it will break a marriage. That is so hypocritical. What were we told when we were growing up? A lot of women faced domestic abuse because they wanted to stay married because of the kids. The kids grew up looking at them, parents fighting, and thinking that was normal, and grew up to dysfunctional homes and accepted that to be the norm. How was that helpful? I'd rather see a family split up, if it comes to that, than seeing you lose your kids on the streets. I know people personally from where I come from whose kids are behind bars due to gang involvement. They have crime rates back home. I keep saying that our problems are not first world problems. We have third world problems, but we came out okay. We don't have a blueprint. It's try and error. What this family did to this young man was a cry for help, and it was a desperate move. When it got to court, the NSPCC had 11 pointers to show that he was getting involved with gang crime. I'll list that on the screen, but just for anybody listening and thinking that I have scared them. If you have young kids, you live in an area you're not too sure of, I want you to check on 4 main things for your kids to spot them either going astray or getting involved with wrong friends, or worse still, with gangs. Do they have very expensive things that you cannot explain where they've got them from? That is a very big red sign. Whatever they say to you, whatever job they do, they should not afford expensive things. If you and I who've been working can't, that is a sign. 2, do they have issues in school, missing school every now and then? Maybe fighting, being in trouble? Another one to look out for. Do you have knives missing at home? Or have you found sharp objects in their keeping? That's another sign. Like the young guy who was stabbed, the mom said he'd lost weight and he had tattoos that could not be explained. Those are all signs. And lastly, why do kids join gangs in the first place? A plethora of reasons again. But the main reasons that come up, and common sense will tell you why a lot of black kids seem to fall in this trap. They want to feel like they want to have a community and a sense of belonging. Why? Because they feel ostracized. They feel different. If I had a choice when I was growing up to be in an environment where everybody looked a bit like me, I'd rather do that. I honestly would rather do that. I have a family relative in this country who refused to live with me because she said I live in a white area and it was far from her black friends. Needless to say, that went completely bad, but I would not really share that story at the moment. But we're saying this because they are facts. They also join because of money. They entice them with money. They entice them with protection and power, brotherhood, and of course many things like friendship and sex. Those are reasons why they're gangs. If you can identify this and give your kids that cushion that they need at home, the reassurance that they are protected, they don't need to be protected, that they belong to a community even if it's not physically where they live. Let them be vocal about threats, because a lot of these boys, for racial reasons, feel like they have to join black gangs to feel like they're protected. Let them be vocal about any threats. It's easier said than done. But if you can watch out for these signs, keep your kids close enough. And a lot of us sit on this table. You know, I have grown kids. They go to school, they come back. I'm not there every minute like a hawk. Even stay-at-home moms in Africa, in Europe, in the US, the kids still end up behind bars for murder because you cannot be with them 24 hours. You do your best and hope that the results are commensurate to what you do. Bottom line, I am very glad that this family won the court case. It's opened literally a can of worms, and it's just opened a flurry of many other kids who will start thinking it's okay to complain that they're being abandoned in Africa or wherever. It's not, it's their home. Let them start knowing now that it's their home. I will end this video, but before I go, I want to say that there is a young man who shared his plan with me on his kids, and I have promised to share this, and I'll probably do that after this video. So if you want to watch that, just stick around the channel. And he's come up with a beautiful way to make sure that the best of both worlds with his family dynamics, providing for his kids and not missing out. So if you enjoyed this video, if you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if there is a family that might need this advice, consider sharing it with them. Thanks so much again for watching. My name is Lulu, by the way. Sorry I did not introduce myself before because this topic was one that I found very difficult to do. And this is Lulu Diaries, where I share stories of how I have learned to navigate life around as an immigrant in the UK for 20 years, things that I wish I knew, things that I tell my younger self, and topics like this that you guys ask me to share my opinion. If there's anything you want, I'll put my email address, share with me, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Bye.